Well, my name is Steve Lindos, and I teach physics across the cemetery, and I can assure you there's no zombies in the cemetery, so there should be a lot more mixing going on. I'm going to talk about time and space. The whole first semester of physics deals with time and space, but time and space isn't just the purvey of physicists. You could actually say music is time and space. In fact, music is really just the time between sounds, and sounds are really just created by the space, or if you want to be less esoteric, the material and the composition, the shape of the materials that take up that space. But we're going to go back and talk about physics because dealing and talking about time and space with kids is what we'd like to talk about. So if I were to say squirrel, everyone would look outside and go, where's squirrel? Because we as humans are trained to be able to recognize certain things. In time and space, you're able to recognize the shape of a squirrel. And if you were needed to find that squirrel because you wanted to eat some meat, I know we were just told not to eat meat. Okay, so but your ancestors were really good at doing this. Pattern recognition is what humans are really good at. And so, one, you'd recognize the pattern of the squirrel, and if the squirrel happened to be moving, you'd recognize how the squirrel was going to be moving, and be able to anticipate where the squirrel was going. Now, really, your ancestors probably weren't hunting. Okay, they were probably scraping up dead squirrels. Okay, so they'd be scavenging squirrels. They'd be gathering and planting. So really what humans evolved for doing initially was finding or understanding time and space to be able to find food that you either scavenged or gathered. And as agriculture got developed, you had to be good at actually planning long term, because agriculture requires a spatial awareness of at least a year. You got to understand when to plant and then when to harvest. So that's kind of what I'd like to talk about in particular. And to be able to do this, I'd like to talk about a little bit what we're not good at. We're not really good at numbers. So how much is a billion? This uncomfortable pause is 10 seconds worth of time. I could have said I'll give you a minute and really only give you 10 seconds, because we're not always really well trained in terms of figuring out these things like give me a second or just a minute or that's a million or something. So I don't know what you guys were doing, but most likely you're making some kind of visual image in your brain. You know, whether or not that was stacking ping pong balls up in this room, or figuring out how many pennies, or saying how much of the national debt is $1 billion. So let's put this into a little bit different perspective, and let's talk about, well, one way to think about a billion is by the world population. So this is where we're at about here. We're over 7 billion in the world right now, and This isn't the one that shows the really huge exponential growth. And this is just projections. I'm not even going to talk about projections, but you know, this is 7 billion you're at, right? And so, you know, when you were born and your parents said, you're 1 in a million, that's supposed to make you feel really special, right? In fact, you're going, yay, I'm 1 in a billion. But that just means there's 7,000 other people just like you. So, let's deal with a local problem when we talk about time and space. Now, I'm not going to say that we can't change, but let's deal with a real local problem, and it's very timely. Okay, so a lot of you are going, yeah, we don't have much to worry about. I mean, wait a minute, wasn't there supposed to be? That's because this isn't now. This is not the flood predictions for right now. This is the flood predictions March 16, 2009. And so I was sitting and people were saying, hey, we don't have much to worry about because we've never really had a big, huge flood, and the chance that it's going to be big is pretty small. It kind of depends on how comfortable you are with percentages. But you know, we really aren't going to be that high. So we don't really have that much to worry about, and you know, we can make a few sandbags and that's not a problem. So this was the Fargo Forum 10 days later. where their words, in a stunning blow, the flood predictions are raised from 42 to 43 feet, up from 41 feet. Remember back there, that was 10% chance of going above 41 feet. So already 10 days later, we're above 41 feet for sure. It's not a 10% chance. It's a foregone conclusion that we're going to get up that high. So what did this look like? Well, if you went on the flood, and you guys are all going to be finding these graphs soon, okay? We're sitting here. This is a little bit past that March 26th, so the next day, and this was the prediction. It was going to go above 42 feet. You're madly. If this talk was longer, I could give you the physics of sandbagging and about how much more bags you need in order to raise it another foot and stuff. Suffice it to say, it's not just, hey, make a couple of other sandbags and tap it on top. You have to worry about the water pressure and stuff. Now, if the Fargo Forum reporters had been actually data mongers, like a physicist would be, you would have been looking at the actual rate of rise. And again, a longer talk, we could talk about our inability to understand rates of change and percentages and stuff. But here is, this is back March 17th, right? The rate of change of the Red River was 0. We didn't need to worry about anything, did we? Because it wasn't changing, it wasn't rising up. But here, you can see the rate of change, and this is real data, so it's noisy, is increasing. In fact, by March 22nd, people should have been in full-blown panic mode because it doesn't look like anything is in, any end is in sight. Well, by March 26th, the Fargo Forum should have been able to say, hey, look, the worst of it is over, actually. The rate of change, now, remember, the rate of change is still positive. That means the river's still getting bigger, okay? So the river has not started dropping yet. But, the Fargo Forum reporter could have said, hey, but it's getting less. It's not rising as fast. And in fact, just one day later, it dropped less than 0 and went negative, which means now it's starting to drop. We're out of the rim. Now, why did it do that? Well, back then, we ended up having a cooling trend that saved us, dodged the proverbial bullet, and so we were sandbagging in the snow. And that slowed the melt, and we literally got saved by the weather. So that's a local problem. Oh, what did that look like, by the way? This is the next day. You could actually see, and you could actually see it was slowing down here, the curve. And so, if you're in physics line, it's a derivative or second derivative, and you're going, oh, that's cool. Okay, so we're slowing down, and we dip down. I could go on and talk about the next dip that came a little bit later, but we're not going to do that. All in all, this is a problem that's well matched to humans in terms of, it's a 2-week time scale. It's slow moving enough, slower than zombies, so you can actually deal with this. Okay, you can if you start soon enough, you can deal with this. Okay, so this is why Fargo is making 1 million sandbags or more, and Moorhead has 400,000 that are it's stockpiled someplace, presumably not in people's garages. But you can actually say, hey, we can do something ahead of time. We know this is going to happen, and we're gonna take steps to actually mitigate it. And this is something that is local in the sense that you could actually walk around, right? So it's just like the hunter-gatherers. You could, walk, probe the ground, figure out how wet it is, and then say, okay, now I know what kind of problem we're going to have. Now you still have to do that to be able to understand your problem. So let's go to a global problem, a little bit different. The Earth is warming. It is definitely warming. Okay, no one can say it's not warming. The thing is, it's not warming just a lot, and it's warming a lot more than what our ecosystems can actually handle, but it's warming at a rate that's unprecedented, and that rate is increasing. So we have a problem. We're racing towards the edge of a cliff, and you got to figure some way to not go off that cliff. Now, I'm not worried about the Earth. I'm actually very, very worried about humans. Because that's all I really care about, is whether or not the humans are going to survive. Because I'm pretty sure the squirrels and other small rodents and animals will survive just fine. Maybe even better without us. Well, maybe not squirrels. So why is the Earth warming? Humans are changing the earth, and if you've been here long enough, you'll have seen this graph or different graphs very similar to it. Carbon dioxide is one of those components of greenhouse gases that's causing a rise in temperature. And just the fact that we're warming wouldn't necessarily be bad, but the fact that our ecosystems can't keep pace. Why is ecosystems important? Well, I like to eat, and I like to eat the food that I've grown accustomed to. And so you don't want to make changes to your ecosystems. Now, there is hope in all this, because if you look at the local problem that we talked about, we were actually able to come together as a community. People care about one another. People actually have the capability and the resilience and the capacity to actually take care of these problems, and you have the capability of change. So it's not necessarily that we can't handle the global, or I should say the global problems that we have faced. It's that we have to train ourselves in order to handle them. Humans don't think long term, right? In fact, on the way back from Boston last week, I sat next to someone and we had a conversation about the flood in the Red River Valley, because I said, are you starting to help sandbag? Or not sandbag, but make sandbags. And he said, oh, they'll tell us when they really need us. And I said, they already have. And that's 2 weeks ahead of time. Fargo has been saying, hey, we need to start making sandbags, because you do have to it takes some time to make 1 million sandbags. So, do we need to change? Yes. Can we change? Yes. The question is, do we have time to change? As we're hurtling towards the cliff and people are debating, well, I don't know if it's 100% of human anthropomorphic carbon is to blame, or if it's only 70 or maybe 7%. Well, it doesn't matter how much percent it is. Just like if you're hurtling towards the edge of the cliff, you don't say, well, whose foot is on the accelerator? If you're hurtling towards, you need to stop. So, that's my talk. That's really more sociological and psychological, and this is global. What's cool about this problem is that it's multidisciplinary, right? And what's vexing about this problem is that it's multidisciplinary. So yes, you could. I mean, in one sense, what you end up doing, you can use tools from physicists, and we can't trace one particular atom or anything, where it's going to go in this room. But the tools of statistical or thermodynamical physics will tell us what everyone kind of does. And I think to a certain extent, that's what you find in human populations. So it's hard to necessarily to tell what one individual person's going to do. No, but if I take an aggregate, I can to a certain degree. Ooh, that was good.